Hey all, welcome to Training with Casey. I'm your host, Casey Cover, and I wanted to talk about I want to start talking about general training. And so I thought I'd start with how to approach animals. To an extent, we'll just explore it a little bit because first you have the way you actually just come toward the animal. And you know what? It's surprising how many people don't give that very much thought. One of the things that irks my horse the most is people will come up and they'll want to pat her on the face. She does not like that. Don't like me to do it. In fact, in general, horses don't want to be patted. They'd rather be scratched or rubbed or something different than patting. And they just don't like it. But if you use name and explain and teach them, they'll become very tolerant of it. They'll become tolerant of it in general, but also we teach our horses to let us kill flies. And there'll be these huge flies and they'll leave huge welts if they bite the horses. But we will just tell them, fly on your whatever, and boom, we'll get them. And then I usually show the spoils of war. It's like, look, this is what we took in. So the animals are willing to tolerate it, and especially if it's to the mutual benefit, but they don't like it. And different animals have different sensitivities. So, for example, if you work with orangutans, they don't seem to mind people looking at them directly in the face or in the eyes. That's not the same case with gorillas. If you look at a gorilla, if you're at a zoo exhibit and you're looking through the glass at a gorilla, that gorilla may just very likely come out, punch you right in the face, like knock the flat glass. It will startle the heck out of you. But if we get started appropriately, things can often change rapidly. So there's kind of sometimes one set of rules for strangers and another set of rules for people that have shown that, they've got some sense, that they have some respect for the animals that they're dealing with. So let's take a quick look at the really basic stuff. I'm doing a time check here. Let's see. There we go. Okay, I got a clock I can actually see. Okay, so I want to talk about 5 things, and then we might go into a few other details on working with animals and approaching them, your initial contact. Think of this as how to meet aliens. All right. I keep hearing that aliens are coming and we're going to have to deal with them. President Trump said that when he was president. Other presidents have said that. So you need to know what you're going to do. And this is probably a good place to start. So let's start with just approaching the animal. You're walking up to the animal, so you just go out and extend your hand and say, hi, I'm so and so, right? Maybe not. In general, I will approach an animal obliquely. So, for example, if I'm approaching them head on, and here's the animal, and I'm going toward them, I'm going to angle in about like so. I want to stay out of the blind spot in the front of all the hoof stock. So if you've got an animal that has the eyes in the front, I'm sorry, on the side of the head, you want to be very conscious of that. They can't see you when you're right in front of them. You know, all those people in Yellowstone that go right up in front of the buffalo to take a picture? Might want to rethink that. So it's the same with dogs, though. I want to approach obliquely. Um, Dogs and other carnivores tend to have their eyes more frontally. So they have more depth perception and they can see right in front of them, unlike most hoofstock. But for whatever reason, I find it's better to approach everybody at an angle. And that angle is probably about 30 degrees. But you know what? If I have to come up behind an animal, I also do about 30 degrees. And I'm not sure, I don't have a conscious understanding of why I make that choice, but it seems to be very effective in my experience. So when you approach, you want to be confident but quiet. We're talking about, these are new animals. These aren't your buddies that know you and are rushing up to see you. These are new animals. Okay. So when I approach that animal, at an oblique angle with my gaze a little bit averted, I'm not going to sit there and stare at them like this. A lot of animals consider that very impolite. And we're talking about not just gorillas, dogs, baboons, um, birds. Birds are very offended if you stare right at them. Just try it. If you go out in your backyard and all the birds are eating in the feeder and everything's fine, pick up a camera and aim it at the birds. And if they're not used to that with you, you'll clear your bird feeder in no time. All right, so there's the actual approach. Here's another thing to be aware of. Perception, modality, appropriateness. Can you tell I couldn't think of a good way to name that? So here's what I mean. We tend to notice things by the perception that we prefer to use. So I'm a very audible person. I like to listen to things on tape. My mother, my sister are very visual, and they like to see it. They don't want to hear it on a tape. They feel like that's a waste of their time. I like it both ways. It works for me either way. But I am a great consumer of books on tapes, but it just won't work with my mother and my sister. So animals are similar. There were some scientists, I think it was M.E. Bitterman's group, and this would be, well, let's put it this way. I was reading the papers in the early 90s. So sometime between the 60s and the 90s, and I don't think they're on the internet, but they're worth checking out. So M.E. Bitterman and his crew or her crew looked at training lots of different animals. I believe they did goldfish, honeybees, you know, all different things. And I think they also did frogs. But anyway, some researcher did frogs. And here they could train honeybees, they could train goldfish, they could train earthworms. They couldn't train frogs. They would get targets in there, and the frogs looked like they were staring right at whatever was being presented, but there was zero response until somebody thought to look at things from the frog's perception vantage. So, what it turned out to be, they concluded, was that they're thinking this frog's sitting in the water staring straight ahead, and they're thinking it's watching the environment. But in reality, the frog appeared to be tuned into pressure on his lateral lines. So he's sitting somewhat submerged in the water, and he is listening intently to movement in that water, changes of temperature or pressure on his skin. And when they started giving him information through that mode, all of a sudden the frog was trainable. You got to think about it. Is this animal focused on hearing? It becomes obvious that you need to do this if you're dealing with a deaf or blind or a deaf and blind being. But other animals can be really surprising. So I'll give you one I found very surprising. How does a snake perceive? And some of them perceive heat and they perceive vibration. And not absolutely sure, I don't know if they hear sound in the registers that we would speak in. But here's one I know for sure. Snakes are very sensitive to energy. Now, how can I know that for sure? You'd be surprised. I worked with an amazing dog named Mishka, and she was learning how to safely detect and respond to various animals that are native to Florida or in Florida that could be dangerous. And so we covered snakes. And we went down to a pet store and we showed her snakes and we got snake sign. And I got a little rubber snake from Walmart and I, you know, paired that with some of the other snake sign, snake evidence, whatever you want to call it. And she, pretty quickly learned that this was snake verbally. But I wanted to give her a more understanding about snakes and what they were like and so on. So there was this great reptile wholesaler, and Mishka's owner arranged for us to go down and work with him for the day to teach Mishka about all these snakes. A big warehouse full of all these different reptiles and so on that they were caring for. And so we took Mishka in and introduced her to other snakes. And now it's time to go in with the rattlesnakes. I wanted her to hear the instant that the rattle started. I wanted her to tune in to that because dogs have great hearing in general, right? And so that would be a great sign for her to know that that specific sound comes from this snake. Well, to make sure she keyed on it, I thought it would be better to get it at the instant it started rather than to walk into an area where snakes were rattling. So after discussing this with the proprietor, he suggested that I go in with my camera because the snakes were going to rattle when I came in the door because they didn't know me. And I'm like, okay, all right. So I take my camera and sure enough, they did rattle continuously and for more than several minutes. And finally I thought, this is crazy. I'm going to try meditating. So I turned my camera off and I just got really meditational, right? And within a minute or so, the snakes stopped rattling. The entire room of rattlesnakes stopped rattling. And I thought, oh, now I can turn the camera on. I didn't say it. I didn't move. I just thought, now I can turn the camera on. And they didn't stop, and they didn't stop. So this time I set the intention to when the snake stopped rattling, I would just move my thumb to turn the camera on. So the camera's ready to go, but to start the recording button. Once again, I had to meditate. Meditated for a few minutes. Snake stopped rattling. I went to push the button. Snake started rattling. Still couldn't bring the dog in. The guys that had the dog outside, they were waiting until the snake stopped rattling. I tried it a third time and I didn't get the camera on that time either. And finally, we got together and we just decided we'll just bring the dog in. And by the way, it did work out. It worked out just fine. But who knew, right? So soon after that, I saw a question from someone. And by the way, this even happened to my brother-in-law. All right, the same problem. Anyway, a guy was camping somewhere in Australia, and a snake came into his sleeping bag. And he wanted to know what he should do. Should he try to leave or should he just stay there? My answer, just stay there. You are not getting out without the snake noticing that you're moving. The snake wants to stay warm. Snakes have other roommates like gopher tortoises and other snakes. Just love the one you're with. Settle down, relax, and wait for the snake to decide it's time to leave in the morning. Now, I'm not saying I would go to sleep. I would be very intentional and very still, but I would not try to get out of my sleeping bag. So that's one important thing to think about. What is the modality? And what is the animal's sensitivity? So I already mentioned that many animals are very sensitive to visual connection, especially if you're intense about it. Now, birds don't like you to look at them, but if you really want to freak them out, just hold up your binoculars or your camera, your video camera. Anything aimed at their direction will just get rid of them. They do not like that. All right, so with perception, modality, appropriateness, you also have things like the way that you talk. Are you too excitable in your voice? Are you talking at a high pitch instead of a low pitch? In general, you want to be kind of low pitched, confident, but not confrontational. And you don't want to scream, right? You want to keep things, if anything, on the low side. And I have seen the effect of high-pitched voices on wolves, for example. And there were times when the wolves were fed baby chicks. When those baby chicks started cheeping, sorry guys, this is how it is in the real world. The chicks would start to cheep and the wolves would get really, really excited by that high-pitched voice. So one of the things I teach kids is when you're around dogs, talk low, don't screech. Now, how about this? Should you run around wolves or dogs? Maybe not. Because the way the animal perceives things, wolves and dogs are very focused on motion. So if you don't want to have a bad experience when you're approaching a wolf or a dog, be intentional about your motion and don't act like prey. So we touched for a minute before on energy with snakes, but they're not the only ones. And there's something really, I don't know, I'm going to call it magical. There's something magical about the effect of you learning to manage your own energy. I'm a really high energy person, I am told. And I'm not I don't look very flappable or anything, but my mother used to say, "Oh my gosh, I can feel you before you come in the room." So she's referring to something that I didn't even know what she was talking about, but she's talking about my energy. Well, go figure. My sister said the same thing. I had a boyfriend that said the same thing. What? What are they talking about? Well, a friend who maybe she felt the same way. But anyway, she was a good friend. And she, for my birthday, gave me a class in transcendental meditation. It was really a challenge for me to learn to do that. But my friend made such a generous investment in my, personal growth and development. I really went to work at learning how to do this. And I spent 2 weeks every day, twice a day, for 10 minutes at a time. That I'd go nuts. But that got me started. And I have been a little bit haphazard, but generally a frequent meditator. I also work a lot with animals my whole life, but it's changed in the last 12 years. In the last 12 years, I'm mostly working out of my home and not going as much. We had the pandemic, right? And I couldn't go. And now my 88-year-old mother and my 33-year-old horse live at home. And so I'm pretty much staying at home these days. But in spending all this time around these same animals and meditating and being around, we have a lot of animals that live on our property, or we live on their property, you could say. But anyway, snakes, frogs, tortoises, all kinds of things. And I actually have a strange problem. My problem is that, let's say I'm taking the dog out and I'm going to go down the stairs, and there's this little skink that lives right on our back porch stairs. And the skink will run towards me. And I had to literally gently move it off the step with my hand because I couldn't just subtly nudge it with my toe. It just stayed right there. In fact, when I stepped back, because I'm going to take the dog out the door, and I don't want the dog to grab the skink or accidentally step on it and hurt it. So when I stepped back after gently nudging the snake off the step, it ran right toward my foot. It came up the step again into the house. There was a frog right on the door jamb. I had to pick it up and set it down someplace else. Now, 12 years ago, or more accurately, I didn't test it 12 years ago, but when I was a little kid running around looking at frogs and so on, they could feel me coming. They would just, dive into the ditches or whatever the instant I came near. And now I can pick them up and move them around. What's going on? We've got snakes here that will come to Dave wanting water. We love the black snakes and the rat snakes that live here. And so we encourage them. We make places for them to live. And we try to make sure there's places where they can get to water. And they get that. You're not going to believe this. Well, maybe you will. My sister didn't believe it. But some young lady was helping me, and she startled a snake. And I got excited about it. It was a very beautiful snake. It was kind of chocolate brown with a bright, like really bright, fiery orange belly. And I grabbed my camera and I said, wow, I hope that I can get a picture of this snake. Now the snake took off. I was going to say running, but you know how it goes. And so I cut around, and sure enough, I'm there setting up my camera as the snake comes out of the vegetation. And I just thought to the snake, I just want to take a picture. You're so lovely. I just would like to take a picture. We're not going to mess with you. And you're not going to believe this, but the snake not only stopped, but she drew her head up so that I could see her. And so I turned the camera on, and got the picture. Gosh, guys, I don't label my pictures. I don't have a system for labeling my pictures. If you have a great system and are willing to share it, please put it in the comments because it's very frustrating to me how to find things once we take all this video. Anyway, got great pictures of this snake. So I believe that my energy has developed as I've gotten older, and I have a different effect on animals. I even remember a time where I was just resting in my pool, and all of a sudden, a cardinal landed on a bush about 8 feet away and stayed there literally for like 10 minutes. And a young raccoon was playing in the tree right above my head. And he just played and played and played. And I remember being very surprised at the time. But there's lots of examples of things like that. So your energy, there's several ways that how energy affects your interaction with animals is important. And one is you need to be quiet, calm, and confident. Kind of make space for the other being. You know, don't take up all the oxygen. I do that sometimes when I talk. I don't mean to. When I'm talking with people, if I get excited about what they're saying, yeah, I'm trying to work on that. I want to play well with others, but sometimes I have too much excitement to do it just naturally. Anyway, so you don't want to be, or, oh, let me grab that snake, right? You just want to be calm and open and predictable. But there's another aspect. And as you approach any animal, you want to be open to its energy. And sometimes you'll just know that an animal is great, that you're just so glad you met that animal. It's a privilege to meet them. Every once in a while, you may be struck with a sense of menace. The animal hasn't done anything that you could blame it for, but nonetheless, you have a feeling of foreboding when you're in the presence of this animal. Take it seriously. I've got other podcasts that I talk about this in, but I know of numerous instances where people did not honor their sense of foreboding, and it went very, very badly for them, including a friend of mine that got murdered by a human that she knew, that I also met. And she wanted to know my opinion of this person. And, I acknowledged that he seemed to be intelligent, well-spoken. Oh, I'm glad you like, I don't like him at all. You need to get him out of your life. And the reason was this man read like a predator. Now, when I say he read like a predator, what does that mean? Well, when you're around other beings for, a lot of time, you just know when they are looking up, when they're, starting to come to attention. Obviously, you're going to know when they're barking, right? I find without even thinking about it, I know when somebody comes into the room with me. And once in a blue moon, for example, when I met this person that ended up being a murderer, I knew that this person was a predator. I got the exact same signal back from him as I had seen, for example, in Jude the jaguar at the National Zoo when he was intent on trying to get a little duckling. And It's funny because I've talked to some other trainers about this, and that some of them have just gone, yeah, I know exactly what you mean. There's a wall. You're not going to get any other kind of information from them. And that's exactly what it felt like. Very guarded, very one way. You could try to extend, comfort, appreciation, openness, and it was not being returned. So pay attention to your own energy, pay attention to the animal's energy. Body language. I like to be comfortable, confident, and not overbearing. I don't want to look uncertain. I don't want to stumble. I want to be sure-footed. I want to be responsive to small changes they make. And that could be like the animal shows a little bit of wariness about me, I'm going to fade back. I don't want them to have to feel, alarmed, like they have to worry about something. So I'm just going to fade back when I see them uh, showing that I'm a little close for them. There's many other aspects of body language. It's, how you hold your arms, your posture. But let me tell you, a big one is not being ready to move. If you let your head hang forward like so, gosh, dogs in particular really pick up on that. I have helped people to really correct their dogs. And when I say correct, I don't mean a punishment, but I mean walking dogs and the dogs are surging ahead. And, I reminded the dog about loose lead walking and so on, but it normally wasn't a problem. But this person had his head hanging forward. Well, the dog is a very athletic animal in general, and they know that you're not centered. You're not ready to move, make any definitive action. You're not athletic. They get it. This person, I suggested that they just change their posture. The problem just totally went away. So, how you move. Here's another one. Don't sit down. Don't sit down when you're working with animals. Stay upright. Walking is better than crouching, but crouching is much better than sitting. And you need to stay over your center of gravity and stay alert. You may need to just move to the side. If you feel that way, do it. There's also things with body language from the animals. For example, many animals will do the sidelong glance. And sea lions, for example, will do that if they're going to bite. So it's almost as if they're going, I think I want to bite you, but I don't know if I'll get away with it. I think I can do it. So when you see that, the eyes shooting from side to side, you need to move into action. Put that animal in the water, close the door, put an animal board in between you and the animal, do something so that you don't get bit and the animal doesn't get into trouble either. So you have your body language, but read the animal's body language. Now, if you would like more information on that, I hope you'll check out my manual, Talk to Me. And Talk to Me talks about the various layers of communication and how to use them all effectively. It might surprise you how many there are and different things that you can do to interact with animals more smoothly and more effectively. Okay, so far we have 4 things we've covered, and I'll review in just a minute. But the last one we're going to talk about today is touching. So touching, a lot of times we just assume a big problem for people with service animals is that all these humans think that it's okay to go up and start stroking their dog. Well, the dog is working. The dog has a life and death job. And I will tell you from being an animal ambassador, um, you know, handler, that it's exhausting for the animal. I used to go out into public events with a little monkey, and 1 or 2 hours in, she would just go to sleep on my shoulder. That was it for a while. And what was the drain? Just the energy of all these people. They'd be so excited. And they didn't look. If you had a sign out that answered all of these questions and you put that sign right in front of you, these people would walk up and totally ignore the sign. They didn't see it. They were just focused on looking at this monkey and asking questions. And they'd ask the same questions. How old is she? How long does she live? What's her name? How old is she? How long does she live? What's her name? Etc. So it's exhausting to the animal and it's exhausting to us. So you don't want to just touch animals without a good reason. They're not going to like it a lot of times, or they've got a job, or you're going to tire them out, or it could be risky. You don't know that dog. So if you really feel compelled that you want to touch somebody else's animal, definitely ask permission. But I would suggest just don't do it. Just take it out of your repertoire. I mean, come on, how would you feel if you're walking with your child down the street and all these people came up and started stroking your kid's head without asking your permission, without, treating your kid like they're not a person? Well, don't let them treat, or don't be the person that treats an animal like they're not a person. Everybody is in charge of themselves. So I like to honor that with animals. So you do need to touch the animal. So how do you do that when it is appropriate? And what I like to do is just open my hands. Don't move toward the animal. I just open my hands and I invite the animal in. Could I touch your ears? Could I stroke your head? And I don't generally do the top of the head or the front of it. Just stay away from the eyes. And I'll usually just come up. And you know what I just learned from a person named Ken Griffith, who works with some very aggressive dogs. And he suggests that you offer a scratch right under the jaw, that this is something that the dog will resonate with from his youth. And it does seem to be pretty effective. So check that out and let me know what you find. Anyway, may I touch you? Scritty, scritty, scritch. Thank you. And then before I do any other thing, I will tell the animal exactly what I want to do. And I'll ask his permission. Can I touch your head? And then I give to the count of 3 so the animal can process the words that I just said. Can I touch your head? Tell me when you're ready. Okay, so that's a way to count to 3. How will the animal tell you? They tend to move their head a little bit to the right, look down just a little bit, and get a soft focus in their eyes. They get very still. And that's them saying, yeah, that's fine. So then I will use an intermediate bridge to tell the animal, this is exactly what I was asking you if I could do. Good, 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 good. That's your head. That's your cheek. That's your jaw. All right. I'm touching your jaw. So I'll tell the animal what I want, and then I'll confirm it verbally. And don't forget the count, because when you say something, if you start moving in to do it right away and the animal hasn't had a chance to process your request, they are more likely to snap. And we'll tell you more about that on another podcast. So let's just summarize what we talked about. I tried to make a mnemonic for it, and I didn't make a good one. I made APE BT. Good luck. APE. So A for approaching animals, P for perception modality appropriateness. Yeah, I know. Let's work on that. E for energy, B for body language, and T for touching. So just to review, when you approach animals, I like to approach at about a 30-degree angle with my gaze slightly averted and with quiet, calm energy that's not invasive. And remember, I'm going to be reading that out. Well, that comes in the next one. Okay. Then perception modality appropriateness. Be aware, is this a really visual animal like a bird? Or is this an animal that goes by scent? First and foremost, scent and hearing. Dogs, they go by everything, I think. Scent, hearing, but they're also very visually oriented. And I definitely know that they pick up not only on, oh, it's a human, they also are able to pick up on various neurochemicals, like, are you upset? Are you guilty feeling, etc. So get that energy straight. Then B for body language, be confident, but keep to your own space and watch the animal's body language. When we talk about body language, we're going to also talk about tone of voice there. Another one is the way you move. Don't move in jerky, unpredictable ways. That's unsettling. Move smoothly, slowly, keep your hands to yourself, don't stare, body language. And then touching, I just open my hands and invite the animal in. And by the way, I don't want to be approached by an animal until I invite them in. So I require that, and I also respect it for the animal. All right, thank you as always. I appreciate so much you're just coming here to listen and spend time, but also the likes, the shares, the comments. I'll tell you, I am so appreciative of comments. It makes me feel like I'm actually reaching out and, having a community, getting to actually talk to someone. So have mercy, share your ideas. And remember, if you have a way to organize your photo files, let me know what works for you. All right. Thank you very much. And we'll see you next time. Take care.